We have two wonderful speakers today, Dr. Fawzi Al-Asmar and Rabbi David Weiss. They will be shedding light on the history of Arab-Jewish relations prior to the establishment of the Jewish state of Israel. This was brought to light most recently with the comments made by some Republican presidential candidates on their history of Palestine. I'm sorry. If you all remember, the denial of the Palestinian history may be a more extreme opinion. However, those comments show that even amongst those who are considered intellectually or politically savvy, there is a culture of denial of the history of Arabs and Jews. In the early 20th century, the demographics of the area were distinctly different from what it is today. The events of 1948 led to the uprooting, destruction, and removal of the vibrant and cohesive society between Jewish and Arab people. We hope this event will give everyone a better perspective regarding the organic social structure once present in the currently occupied territories. Food will be served at the end of this event, just to let you guys know. So our first speaker is going to be Dr. Fawzi Al-Asmar. Dr. Fawzi Al-Asmar is a distinguished Palestinian writer, poet, academic, and journalist. He is recognized as a major authority regarding the Palestinian citizens of Israel. His articles are syndicated in the Arabic press throughout the Middle East. He has written numerous books, including Through the Hebrew Looking Glass and The Arabs in Israel. The latter has been published in 7 languages, including English, Hebrew, and Arabic. Born in Haifa, Palestine, Dr. Al-Asmar grew up in an occupied portion of Palestine. He attended CCSU and received his BA degree with honors from the university in 1975. He subsequently earned his PhD from the University of Exeter in England. Dr. Al-Asmar has lectured and taught at a number of universities, including St. Anthony's College, Oxford University, Bradford University in England, and the American University in Washington, D.C. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Fawzi Al-Asmar.
Good evening. Thank you very much for inviting me. And I give this subject a lot of thinking. It's not that easy subject. It's very wide, has a lot of material, and I was thinking, how can I summarize it to explain to you or give you a picture about the subject. I was born in Palestine. As I said to the rabbi that as much as I know, I am the 18th generation in Palestine. Before that, I don't know how many generations. But of course, we have now more generations of my family there. Before 1948, my father was working in the railroad. And they had a lot of Jewish friends, Jewish people working with them. And I remember as a child, some of them that they were coming to our house, having dinner with us. We went to visit them. We spoke Arabic. It was just like, you know, something normal in life. We always had Jews in Palestine, always lived there. And most of them came, especially from Yemen, I remember, and they lived in Jaffa. And their purpose of coming was religious. Some of them, until even today, some of them, they call themselves Arab Jews. That they are Arabs, but their religion is Jewish. We had a very good relationship together. Muslims, Christian, Jews, we lived in harmony. I want to try to translate to you something here. It came, there's a person called Shmuel Toledano. Shmuel Toledano was born in Tiberias, Tabaria, from a Jewish family, from one of the oldest Jewish family in Palestine. He became a very important person after the creation of the Israeli state. He was an advisor for three prime ministers, Levi Eshkol, Golda Meir, and Yitzhak Rabin, advisor for Arab affairs. I found an interview with him was interviewed by Al-Sharq Al-Awsat newspaper in London. And struck me. I knew about him. I heard him several times talking. He knows Arabic like an Arab, I mean. When in this interview, he was asked to identify himself. He said, I am a Palestinian Jew. I am a Palestinian Jew. And he said, I am a Palestinian Jew because I was born in Palestine. And before 1948, everything was Palestinian. The newspaper, even in Hebrew, they mentioned Palestine and wrote about Palestinians. And he said that we lived together with the Arabs in Tiberias. Two families that they were like one family. That's what he's saying. That's I'm trying to translate what he said. The family of Tabari, which is from Tabaria, that he was the mayor. He was the mayor of Tiberias, and a Sayer. His best friend was Fawzi Sayer, a Palestinian, a very important person he was. And he said that we were playing together in the street, we were sleeping at each other's houses, we go picnic, families. We were like one family. But then he said in this interview that after the creation of Israel, everything's changed. And the name Palestine became enemy. When you say a Palestinian is enemy, a Palestine is terrorist. And he said, I cannot take that. I mean, this is a very important person who was speaking. He said, I cannot take that because I know the Palestinians. I lived with the Palestinians. I know their tradition. I know their language. I cannot say that they are terrorists. And he said something very, very important, at least to me. He said that when the Israeli forces conquered Tiberias, the city, they kicked out the Palestinians. They kicked out my friends, he said. But what made him very angry is that as soon as the Palestinians left, they sent bulldozers to bulldoze all their houses so they cannot return. And then he said that one of his mission was that he wanted to be in the government. He became a member of Knesset, by the way. And he was also, he worked with the Mossad, as he said in this interview. And he said that one of the missions I wanted is to reach peace. I want my friends to come back. Then he tells a story that in his work he heard that his friend Faiz Sayer is in Switzerland. So he flew there, and he knew that Faiz is going to take a boat to one of the islands somewhere. So he went into that boat, and he said, we met on the boat. We both start crying, hugging each other, and remembering the streets where we were playing. That's a testimony of one of them. Now, what changed? What changed here? What makes everything change is the Zionist movement. In 1897, the first Zionist Congress, they decided in that time, and I'm here, Zionism seek to establish a home for Jewish people in Palestine. That's what they wanted. Now, before that, one of the most important Jewish writers, I think he's from Russia, his name is Ehad Am. Ehad Am, it's not his real name, but that's his nickname, which means one of the people. Ehad Am, one from the people. He visited Palestine in 1891. He wrote a very famous article called "The Truth from the Holy Land." In that article, he said, we abroad think that Palestine is empty. There are no people there. And anybody can go and take a land and cultivate the land and live there. But let me tell you, he said in his article, that this is not correct. There is no 1 inch of cultivated land in Palestine doesn't belong to the native, the Palestinian Arabs. Of course, nobody listened to him. And the slogan came, the Zionist slogan came, the land without people to a people without land. Now, I have a lot of research on that. In fact, one of my books called The Arab Image in the Hebrew Children's Stories. And I was interested to know how they explain to the children how this land was empty. Well, if we have time with question and answer, I could, give you examples. But the decision was taken, and the Jewish immigration started coming to Palestine, and we start the problem. They established something called the Jewish National Fund. Now, Jewish National Fund is strictly Jewish, which means that the purpose of this fund is to buy or get or hold any piece of land in Palestine. But it is owned according to their rules, or it belongs to the Jewish people, which means that nobody can live there or use the land or have a benefit from the land except if he is a Jew. Now, they came, and we have some non-Palestinians and also some Palestinians who sold the land. Like we have people from Sursuk family in Lebanon. They sold one of the most important piece of land, 40,000, I think, dunam, which is huge. And on that land was 23 villages that people were living there, working on the land. When the Jewish National Fund bought the land, they kicked them out because, according to their regulation, they cannot have non-Jews living on the land that belongs to them. And that's where the whole story started. We had a conflict. Now, there's another story that I have to tell you. In the mid of 1920, it was a Zionist leader called Max Nordau. Now, Max Nordau was the right hand of Theodor Herzl, the father of the Zionist movement. He sent a group of rabbis to check in Palestine to see what's happening there. This group of rabbis sent him a telegram from Palestine saying, the bride is beautiful, but she is married to another man, which means Palestine married to the other people. So the decision was taken in that time that we should have that bride even if we have to kill the other man. Now, this is the background why the conflict took place. Zionists came, they kicked out the Palestinians, they took the land. I'm a Palestinian, I was there. 1948, I witnessed how they kicked the people from my hometown, from Lida, by force. I wrote about that, in fact, in one of my books called To Be an Arab in Israel. In fact, there's one point about that. Mr. Rabin, when he wrote his memoir, Yitzhak Rabin was the general who occupied my homeland, my hometown. And he killed hundreds of people, hundreds. And they created, the refugee problem through that. When he wrote his memoir, the censorship in Israel did not allow him to publish the chapter on Lida, or Lid, my hometown, and what happened there. And the only time that, To Be an Arab in Israel, as you heard, was translated to a lot of languages, and had reviewed over almost every major newspaper except in the United States. I have some reviews here, like Boston Globe, Christian Science Monitor, and so on, but not the New York Times, Washington Post, or the only time New York Times mentioned the book To Be an Arab in Israel, when they wrote about Yitzhak Rabin. They said, well, there is nothing new in the chapter that the censorship didn't allow Rabin to publish, because the story is written in To Be an Arab in Israel by Fawzi Al-Asmar. That's the only time. Until today, the Jewish National Fund is very active. They are very active in the occupied territories. They are trying to get more lands, to be Jewish lands. I mean Jewish by that land that nobody can use it except Jews. Now, in 1954, Mr. Ben-Gurion, the Prime Minister, decided to allow or to give all the land in the state of Israel to the Jewish National Fund. All of it. Which means that nobody can use that. And you heard about kibbutz and the kibbutzim and the life and the beautiful life. Now, why did they accept Arabs? Because the land of the kibbutz belongs to the Jewish National Fund. They cannot accept Arabs there. They cannot accept, especially Arabs. They will have some non-Arabs, I mean, European or something or whatever. They will rule it, but they cannot. The Jewish National Fund is still working now in the West Bank and buying as much or putting their hands, confiscating land. And land is the most important thing for Palestinians. Israel is taking land. Land for them is land, for us is a homeland. Watan is not just a land. When you take part of my land, you are taking part of my homeland. And I hope one day some of the Israeli young generation, which now they start understanding after 60-some years that there's not going to be peace unless the Palestinians will get their rights, and Palestinians at least get their state. Otherwise, as we say, as they say in Hebrew, it will be the 100 years war. Thank you.